Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammam sangham namasami. So you guessed by now that who's giving the talk tonight. Empty seats here. No microphone on Ajahn Amaro's robe. So it's my turn. I was kind of thinking, it's a girls' night tonight. Even though I really dislike the word girls in that context. So it's the 7th day. My counting is correct. 7th day of sitting together and being together and suffering together and experiencing the joy of insight together, despair, disappointment, and humor. I hope you haven't lost it. I always have a kind of ambivalent feeling about this retreat since I've been in this business for quite some years. And it's interesting that today in one of the interviews, one woman was describing to me her impression of how suddenly she felt, my God, what are we doing here? It was so weird. It's so bizarre. Here we are all sitting together in silence, and then we walk back and forth in a kind of strange, boring way. And then we sit again, and the bell rings, and we sit again, and And as she was saying this, I had to laugh. I was smiling because I had a similar thought earlier in the afternoon when we were sitting here, and I thought, what a strange bunch we are. All sitting here on this high seat, facing each other, 100 people facing me for the last 7 days, and sitting high, and we don't even know each other. We just assume that we are in the same in the same business. So it's important to have this moment of recognition where suddenly you realize that it's an interesting or kind of funny predicament. How many of you have come miles and miles away and paid a lot of money to be here, and you're not even eating the food that maybe you like, or I'm sure you're not sleeping the amount of time you like to sleep. You might not even sitting next to the person you want to sit. In fact, you might be sitting next to somebody who's really aggravating your retreat. Obviously not. Otherwise, some people will be laughing. But it can be scary to think like that. What are we doing? Who are we anyway? Who's sitting up here? Who's sitting down there? And if we believed in this thought, if I believed in that thought, if I hadn't seen that this kind of situation are actually meant to exacerbate the sense of self, what is me, my condition, me, my personality, maybe somebody else would have said, "Well, that's all very nice, isn't it nice? We're all together here, we're happy together, and all." Not even maybe noticed it was funny. Maybe some years ago I wouldn't have thought it was funny. And then when that question arises in the mind, I say, "Oh my God, I shouldn't think like that, maybe." But then I've learned to really honor that kind of thinking, because we, even though we are very keen to liberate ourselves from what we think is that sort of obstacle in our life, what we call me, the me that's creating all our troubles, we often don't know how to liberate it because it comes in many disguises. I'm sure you've noticed during this week how many times you think you got it right, and then suddenly something just kind of woof, you've taken away miles from that sense of rightness. That sense, I know I've got the insight, I know what to do, I won't be fooled again, I'm sure things will be all right. And then you open the door of the shrine room there, and bang, the same old boring habits just kind of, jump at you. And you say, oh, where is it? I knew it. I saw it really clearly. I saw that this anger was really totally useless. I've seen it rising and passing away. I've seen it rising again and passing away. I've seen the suffering it causes me. And then you find suddenly, within the next 15 minutes, something happened and you're back into the same track, angry about something even more silly, even less relevant, totally meaningless, which is exactly what those retreats are for, is to show you the silliness and the stupidity and the meaninglessness of what we call me. When me suddenly becomes really irritated because the peanut butter pot is just gone away under your nose while you were just about to put your spoon in, and somebody just picked it up and look at you in a really kind of with a stern look. Said, don't tell me what to do. Or something silly like, somebody walking in a funny way in front of you. People can really be incredibly irritating, but just with the way they walk. Haven't you noticed? And that doesn't look like a very serious thing. To be irritated once you've been really going through this profound insight into the nature of reality. I've seen at last that you have really a truly compassionate heart. You can accept everything. You can open yourself to everything, and then somebody walks with a funny leg, and you just want to smash them. That's really silly, isn't it? So we are here to really develop a great sense of humor about the silliness of ourselves. And we do take ourselves very seriously. You know that. Somebody can say, I'm really short-tempered and I'm not really a good person, I'm really short-tempered. And then a person next to that person says, oh, quite right. So whilst you were saying it, everything was fine. In fact, you felt confident, you felt truthful, you had a great sense of integrity in yourself, you felt you were really honest. And then somebody happened to have the same idea about you. What happens? How dare you telling me what I am? Who do you think you are? Anyway, you won't say it, but you will feel it. And the feeling will be, I'm hurt. So we're very good. This is the way the self fools us. We're very clever at presenting ourselves in a very, interviews are wonderful for that. People can, I'm not saying necessarily on this retreat, but
another retreat.
I'm covering up, can't I? But many retreats that I've taught, people can describe me the sense, I'm like this and I'm like that and I experience this and I experience that, and goes the whole shabab. And then suddenly, they'll say, but I know it's all empty. I know it, it's not really me. Well, why do you hang on to it then? You know, what's the point of... I mean, it's important to tell the story of me, because that's sometimes how we can let it go, by just expressing it in words and actually having a mirror of somebody else that can reflect back at you the silliness of it all. With compassion, because we're all in the same business, you know. We've all been through this ourselves and still continue to be, going through that same process. So, that me, which we're so keen, we all come here to really rub our nose into it. We want to see it, we want to know it, we want to get rid of it. Basically, we hate it. And we also remind ourselves that we want to love ourselves, we want to be compassionate. So we're confused, really. We get very confused. Sometimes we hate it, and sometimes we love it, and sometimes we want to dismiss it, and sometimes we want to disregard it, and sometimes we become really the central focus, the biggest thing in our life. And what people have shared with me in the interview is that it was through the teaching of Ajahn Sundara, discovering that suddenly that little blot of me is actually only a blot. It's not the whole space of your life. It's not the whole mind. But a lot of the time we do live our life as if this me was all you had. And if that's really what that was the only thing we had, it would be a pretty miserable predicament, wouldn't it? For 7 days, you've been scrutinizing that reactive little ego of ours. And it's really treacherous, isn't it? Because it is really, a suffering me. And it's confusing, and it's distressing, and it's, and sometimes it's very clever, super intelligent. In fact, this is the major obstacle. It's not so much that the me is stupid, it's that it's very intelligent and rational. It can express itself brilliantly. So we have a hard time staying with ourselves before the me has exploded in some kind of, splendid rationale, justifying itself, covering itself up, pretending that it's not doing what it's doing, and so on. And most of you have come to this retreat. We've done many retreats, because most of you are quite experienced in this practice. Because somehow that there is another way, there's another source from which we can function. There's another source in our life which is much more appropriate to relate to it without the suffering that is so deeply connected with the self-view, the me, the I, and so on. Now, the manifestation of this sense of I, which is the most pernicious and the most vicious and the most horrid aspect of it, is part of the second noble truth, which is not wanting to become. How many of you are very, are clever enough to know what to do with a sense of self? You can describe it, you can study it, you can analyze it, you can see it even rising and passing away. But the strongest thought behind all this is it should not be like that. Many of you have expressed the suffering that is so ingrained in that mode of apprehending ourselves. it should not be like that. It's constant. It's a sort of, you could say, I think it's really the mantra of ignorance. It's one of its, probably a few mantras of ignorance. That should not be like that. Yes, but it should not be like that. Yes, but how many times do we fall into that pattern? And yes, it is like that. Yes, but it should not. So let's say when we are mindful, then it should be like that. And that's fine. Everything falls into place. And then you lose mindfulness. It should not be like that. And then you go into mindfulness again. You're back into touch with being clear and confident and mindful and aware. Oh, it should be like that. And then you've lost it. Shouldn't be like that. I mean, I'm sort of making fun of that, but isn't it what we do so often? Isn't it what prevents the mind from releasing, from flowing, from relaxing, from just letting things be as they are? And I think for most of us Westerners, this is the strongest power. It is the strongest obstacle in our practice. That wish for things to be other than they are. And we use the practice sometimes to reinforce that habit. This is why there's come a time in my practice when I said, forget about Buddhism, forget about the Buddha, forget about the nuns, forget about everything. Just drop it, pretend there's nothing there. And that's been the most extraordinarily liberating experience. When they say, I think in the Zen tradition, if you see the Buddha, just kill the Buddha. That's exactly what it is. If you see the practice, kill the practice. If you hold on to the practice too tight, just kill it. Because sometimes, if you remember the Buddha's during the Buddha's life, just before he got enlightened, he'd been practicing 6 years of intense ascetic discipline, and really strenuous ascetic practices. And he suddenly realized that didn't work. Willfulness, intensity, shutting the mind down, didn't work. And he suddenly had this memory of him sitting in the orchard of his father's palace. And remembering how after he was a young man, and he was remembering this moment when suddenly his mind became really still. It wasn't super concentrated, but he was mindful. There was a degree of mindfulness, degree of concentration. And there was no unskillful states of mind. There was no unskillfulness in his mind. His mind was relaxed, at ease. And it was skillful. What we call, it was in accord with Dhamma. There was no evil things. There was no obstacle. There was nothing. His mind was just relaxed. And I often really considered that many times in my practice, because like most of you, I'm sure we know that intensity of wanting to be enlightened, wanting to be free of the hindrances, wanting to not be greedy, wanting to not sleep a lot, wanting to see the right things at the right moment with the right people in the right place. Isn't it true? Am I the only one? That's reassuring. I was beginning to wonder. That desire to have things laid out exactly how it should be, not as it is. So most of us in our practice, we have to go through the shadow of the should be, which is, it is. That's a very different story, isn't it? My knees should not hurt. They do. My mind should not be obsessed. It should not fear. It should not be mindless. And that should not be thinking about the meal right now, 7 o'clock in the morning. And that should not be thinking about the end of the retreat. In fact, I should not be thinking I'm enlightened right now. And yet this is, when that is happening, when actually you are feeling tremendous desire for some things, or you feel you are angry at when a memory occurs in the mind, you feel very angry. What a stupid thing to be angry about something that's maybe not even there. All of us can teach somebody else, can't we? I mean, often when I teach people, I say, what would you do if you talk to somebody else? If somebody asks you that same question you're asking me, what would you do? And of course they have a wonderful answer. They say, why don't you do it then? You know it, don't you? You don't need me. You've got it. You know what to do. So, we have quite an interesting task ahead of us when we consider how many times we don't accept things as they are. Ajahn Sundara has talked beautifully about the way things are, but a lot of our time we actually plodding through the way it should be. Our ideals. And that's very miserable, because our ideals have very little relationship to reality, have they? They don't get on very well. They're not really good friends. And often the lessons are hard, because we don't even know we are idealistic. We don't even know we are, imagining things. We don't know it until something happens and hits us, and we say, oh my God. Of course, we blame the whole world for it, and then once you've gone through this, then you realize you were just in an ideal world. So consider in your practice, the energy of shouldn't is the antithesis or the opposite of loving kindness. Metta is, metta is having a child which is totally obnoxious and still love that child. Ideal is you have an obnoxious side, and it should not be like that. It should be different. And we relate to ourselves very much in the same way. Who in this room think that they have exactly the right body, the right mind, the right thoughts, the right feelings? How many books could be written about the amount of things that's not right in us? In fact, many people write books about that. Sickening. Sickening. You get really fed up about personal stories. Because in fact you can't read very much once you've let go of your personal story. There's very little you can write. In fact, there's nothing you can write. So it's really, people can write something about a topic. It's usually, I don't want to insult anybody, but it's usually quite a lot of self there, And I don't mean in every cases. We can write a book out of wisdom as well. Compassion. So consider how many times during the day, during the course of this retreat, you have resisted the way things are. There's the tension that we experience in our practice is just the symptom of our resistance through perhaps many lifetimes, not just this one, not just this week, but maybe from so long ago, we're still reaping right now the resultant karma of our life, and we often take things so personally, which is a great suffering, because our personal story is important in the sense that it has to be listened to, and it has to be honored, and it has to be respected and received with kindness. I don't deny that at all. I've been through it myself, and I think it's very important that you do listen to yourself with compassion. Even when the mind is saying, for the 30th time, yes, but, he did it like this, and I told him he was really an idiot, and he told me that, or she, or 30th time, 31st time you hear it again. And one glimmer of mindfulness just sips through, and you just kind of stop it for about 10 seconds, and it goes again, and then say, yes, but he did it again, and she did it, and he told me, and that I told her, and I told her, and when he great detail. They say it's traumatic usually. Traumas go into a lot of details. So if your mind is going through intense memory with all its details, you're just going through, mini trauma or reliving a kind of little mini trauma of your lives. I find it quite useful actually. When the mind gets very, very clever and remembers every single little shades of the napkins and the size of the glasses and the shade of the light and the color of the shoes and whether there was whatever details. It's just a sign that it was more traumatic than other memories. I find it very helpful when I heard this quite a while ago. That, I didn't have to worry about just being obsessive. It was just reliving a trauma of some sort. No, not a big one, but when you go, when you get so obsessive into details, it's obviously something that marked you on some level. Because how many things happen through the day, through the month, through the year that we don't, even yesterday you might not remember at all. If I ask you, what did you eat yesterday? You haven't been traumatized, have you? You don't remember. Some of you do. And the carrots were not organic, and the brown rice wasn't there, and we didn't have any cakes, and I'm not thinking about us because we're loaded with cakes up there. In fact, we kind of, slowly taking over the cushion. So why is it so difficult to be at peace with ourselves? Because the rational, we got it all. We got that. We got the books, we got the teachers, we got the ABC. We've done the course. And yet when you sit on your cushion, how many minutes pass, before something you say, oh, what's the point of sitting here? Nothing is happening now. I haven't got my jhana yet. Anyway, what's his jhana? I wonder what he said. And he said jhana was like this and like that. And it spent an hour just wondering whether in the first, second factors or not. And then you've been told, be mindful of the body. You've been guided by Ajahn Sundara, sort of breathing in and out. And your mind is going, yeah, but jhana is... What did Joseph said about breathing? or whoever, our mind just goes into some other kind of agenda. In fact, it's got very different agenda than our mindfulness, than the Buddha Dhamma in us. Buddha Dhamma has its agenda. In fact, it doesn't have any agenda. That's our problem. Can we live without one? This is the thing. Buddha Dhamma doesn't have any agenda. It's completely chaotic. In fact, I studied the sort of law of chaos theory because I thought this is very much our experience. You just happen to have a nasty little thought at some point and you find the waves of 3 hours later, some terrible thing happened. You wonder why. Or thought of metta, and some people have shared with me this kind of wonderful effect, just of having one little seed of metta planted in the mind, seeded in the mind, and something wonderful out of that happens. But we can't count on it. Sometimes I've spread metta. I remember as a younger nun, fortunately, mopping in the scullery at Chithurst. One morning during my chore time and spreading metta to every grain of bits of concrete on the floor I was mopping till they were enlightened. And I remember very consciously spreading metta as I was mopping. And somebody suddenly pounced on me and said, "Who do you think you are? Are you trying to intimidate me?" You really feel kind of miffed, don't you? So you can't count on anything, really. You just have to do it without any result, without any, don't expect anything out of your practice. Some people say to me, "Where is the practice leading you? Is there any, where are we going? What are we doing? You're going nowhere. And this practice is for, why do we practice?" Some people ask me. I say, for nothing. There's absolutely no reason for practicing, really. The only reason is your suffering. That's the only thing that will make you practice. At any subtle level, it could be existential suffering, it could be mental, it could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be some kind of realization of suffering. Because most of you, many people in this room do not have heavy suffering. But you're still here because even without that heaviness in the heart, you still understand that life is a little bigger than that blot of me, a little blob. That kind of barring the way to comfort, ease, freedom, peace, confidence, faith, and so on. So some people were asking me, I like to practice metta, but I can't do it because it makes me angry. Funny, isn't it? Do you feel angry when you practice metta? I was enraged for about 3 years every time I practiced metta. Every time the word Ajahn Sundara, he didn't do so much that kind of practice, fortunately, because I'm not sure I'll still be with him. Because all that, I felt it was such a kind of brainwashing performance, may I be at peace, may I be well, when I was just kind of, wanted to get a grip on my on anicca, dukkha, anatta, on the wisdom aspect of the teaching. I wanted to really see the arising of my thought and the passing away, and I wanted to really see how it affected me, and just having all these kind of nice things, metta and kindness and all that. So that kind of, I was losing my grip, control. I was losing control, and I hated that, the idea of just, not being in charge. Because once you open your heart and there's metta in your heart, then you can't judge anymore. You can't really be nasty. You can't get angry anymore. It's really boring. Nothing more boring than metta, at first. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about that because I can see, from what I've heard, it's a predicament that most of us have. You've got very few people that are born in the West with metta. Most of us are born here, I think, because we're angry type. We're kind of thrusting type. We just like to pitch in and control. And of course, it might have something to do with the weather. It's cold, so we have to get things, going. In Thailand, you can relax and you can have lots of metta there because if you move and think too much, you probably die of a heart attack. So, we're not worse than they are, really. It's just that we had to adapt it to our climate. And the only way we could do it is by getting a bit angry with the cold and the discomfort of our situation, So, it's... there's not that much time really to talk about this in depth, at length. But I remember, I often teach at least once during a retreat, a guided metta meditation. And the last one last of the one before, I was teaching at Amravati. I remember somebody, who's been coming on retreat several times, said finally to me that she just could not do that metta thing. She'd never been able to do it. She hated it. And in fact, every time she started wishing her well, there was total aversion rising up. So she was, it was difficult. And she was a lovely person. You would have given, I've thought she was really a peaceful type of person, very lovely and so on. And in the end, we do have to rely on what we ourselves find is working for us. That's what the Buddha's teaching is all about. Even though we have Buddhist, quote-unquote, skillful means and Buddhist, quote-unquote, ways of addressing the mind, in the end, we also have to develop what works for our own particular situation. So I remember once when I did a 3-month solid metta practice, but that came after I had sort of been through into the grip of hatred, aversion, anger for many, many years. And I really got fed up with it at some point. Because I thought my anger was quite intelligent anyway. I didn't want to give it up. My anger made me sharp and clear, one-pointed. Confident. And separate, I was special. Metta includes everything. You just become this kind of pink blob with everybody else. Kind of pulsating with loving kindness. Nothing of that sharp edge you get with good clear moments. In fact, you don't know who you are at some point. You're just kind of pulsating with this loving kind of feeling, kind of rosy feeling. And the ego just hates it. Sense of self just can't stand metta. Only when it starts cheating you and make you believe that this is the only way you can survive. Like metta for the ego will be, can you give me another piece of chocolate, please? Oh, I want more of that. Just be kind to me, Tell me I'm really wonderful. That's the metta of the ego. Go to your friends and, do you think I'm all right? Tell me, That's the metta of the ego. Wants to be pampered all the time. You hope people will love you as your ego. And so, but the metta, in the practice, the thought of doing a traditional kind of route, metta route, through the teachers and the parents, anyway, that was just already too structured for me. I like sort of, free-flowing spirit experience. So I remember the teacher that I had at the time, the person who was kind of guiding the nuns at the time, was for me one of the most difficult person in the community. And even though I could appreciate the great teaching of that person, personally, on a personal level, which is very important, very important, don't forget the person, was totally, absolutely unbearable at times. But I was working with it. I was not being deluded. I was working with it, and the way I was working with it was the way Ajahn Sundara was instructed us at the time. When something frightens you, or you don't, it's really difficult to hate your Mother Superior. And so, I was working, and I remember I was walking toward that person, and I was kind of bringing up all these horrible thoughts consciously, knowing that these thoughts were not actually reality. They had nothing to do at that time, because I really didn't have any nasty feeling towards that person. But I kind of bringing up the thought, and there was no feeling with it, which was interesting. And eventually the person said to me, just out of the blue, just before the Vasa, remember, the Vasa period is the 3 months where we take a vow of stability, and sometimes we go into more intensive practice or not. We give up chocolate or cheese or a bit of sleep or a bit of speech, or, we kind of give up something during the time. It's kind of Buddhist Lent type of thing. And so this person came to me and said, Sundara, you don't need to give up chocolate and cheese this time. Why don't you do practice metta? I said, yeah. This would happen in monastery. You're just really vulnerable. No, nothing to hide. But I was ready. Because I didn't punch him in the nose. Psychically. I didn't do anything. I said, okay. And I went. And then I thought, how am I going to do that? Because I'm a perfectionist, by nature. So I was going to do the perfect metta practice. I was going to lead me to the perfect results of metta, so that I could be the perfect metta meditator, compassionate, loving, and so on. I'm not going to go halfway, or just do a sort of tepid, lukewarm, wishy-washy type of practice. It was going to be top class, thing. So I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? May I be well? And I just couldn't bear the thought of... And the thought of being sweet for 3 months, that was even more unbearable. In fact, it just wanted me to look angry all the time, And the thought of being nice and friendly, there's no way, So I thought, well, okay, Sundara, you've got to find it. This is, I'm sharing this story with you because we all have to find our means in the end also. Until the mind is a little bit more subdued, a little bit more malleable, a little bit more ready to follow your orders. Whilst it's in a resisting mode, you have to find skillful means of your own. So mine was still resisting the thought of, being, may I be at peace, may I be free, may I be, It will bring out the sort of, I don't want that, And then I will start again, and it's kind of, I don't want to be angry for 3 months. It's a dreadful thing, this metta. So I thought, well, what can you do then? And I really contemplated about a couple of weeks. And what came to my mind, which is not what may be useful for you at all, but you have to find your own means, was, well, I always identify myself with being kind of strong and able to cope with things, So I had this little word that came up in my meditation one day, which says, well, maybe you can just say, I can bear it. And it worked. It was wonderful. I said to someone on the interview, don't use that word for you, because you don't need that. You have already such a strong conditioning that you can bear things. Anyway, you should bear things. You have to bear them. That worked for me because there was no should behind it. It came from the heart. The heart doesn't have any should or shouldn't. It's loving, compassionate, unreactive, and immediate, direct. So there was no should or shouldn't. And it felt just like the right response. I can bear it. It's unpleasant, but I don't have to hate it. I can bear it. And that I can bear it for me was synonymous with I can release it. I can let it go. I can give the space for this to be and drop it. Or let it be and go when it wants to go. And that's what I did for about 3 months. Instead of turning into a little pink, nice little kind of smiling pink-cheeked nun with a sweet little face. I don't mind now, but in those days I still wanted to look kind of tough meditator. It worked. It kind of opened the Pandoras Box, and I released probably lifetimes of anger. But it was peaceful. It was not unpleasant. There was a tremendous kind of liberating feeling that came out of just consciously giving space to things that were hadn't been given space. And even it went even deep. It went into the body sensation. I could be aware then of various parts of the body which were tense. And suddenly I said, oh, I can bear it. No? So, since many of you have asked me to talk about that, and I don't know time, as I said, to talk in great lengths, Metta is now, for me, after many years, I'm very happy to brainwash myself. This is the good news of anicca. Things change. I'm very happy. I don't have any qualms about brainwashing myself all day with, may I get peace, may I be happy, may I be well, may all being be at peace, may all being... I just love it. Because it's become part of me in a way. I'm not in that kind of reactive mode. I'm not identified anymore with this idea that I have to be somebody who is kind of strong. It's all rubbish, really. And also, of course, that has come because I've seen the effect in the body on the level of emotions, just the effect of this wonderful food that metta is. It's a good food. It's a good nourishment for the heart. But don't expect anything out of it, Don't expect anything, because if you start thinking, well, if I do metta, so then I will get on with my husband, or I'll be able to bear my mother-in-law, or my children, or my boss. I won't be cranky with my boss anymore. I'll be able to be kind. It doesn't work like that necessarily, When you enter the realm of mindfulness, you enter the realm of no control. That sounds funny, isn't it? Because on the one level, we want to control, we want to direct our mind towards that which is skillful and away from the unskillful, But with metta, or with mindfulness, you see, but you don't judge. You see, but you don't judge. And through the seeing, non-judging seeing, then you become very acquainted, little by little, with that which is skillful and that which is unskillful. And it's through a lot of trial and errors. This is why, for me, the only safe reference point in my practice is, where am I suffering right now? Because anything else doesn't seem to be clear enough to know where I'm attached or where I'm not. And if there is suffering there, what is it? Just being mindful of that which is behind the suffering. Sometimes we have so many ideas. We bring the sense of self so strongly in our own meditation practice. You experience something and say, oh, yes, well, it's going to be anicca anyway, it's going to pass. And it's not passing away. Or I should be more mindful of this now. I should really be more mindful. I think, maybe metta work better. Let me see if I can have metta for that. Or I think I should sit upright a bit better, and I can really get a hang of it. It's not going. Oh God, I'm losing mindfulness. I know I'm not really mindful enough. Let me breathing in and out a few times. Send in metta. I think I've got to ask Ajahn Sundara, I'm not doing it right. Got to bring it in the interview. Not going. Surely the Buddha said it's impermanent. We don't think like that, but our emotional responses are like that, aren't they? Should be gone. Should have. So all this, it's also a manifestation of self. At the level of emotion, at the level of, we have already a preconceived idea of how things should be. We have an idea of how meditation should go. Sit on your cushion, preconditioned meditator, straight away, in, out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sit up straight, 10, forgotten, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, no. We come to our meditation cushion just in the same old, boring, mechanical, habitual, conditioned way often. Know that. And if you get fed up with your cushion in your sitting practice, it's just because you're totally uncreative with it. Mechanical. Habitual. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some of you look really... it should be like that. There's nothing wrong. This is just how the mind is. The self doesn't have a lot of scope, actually. It's either I like, I don't like, good, bad, right, wrong, big, small, clear, unclear. It doesn't have much nuances. Painful, pleasant, and that sort of thing. So, notice that if there is, most of our practice in relationship to that sense of self is a matter of just enduring with compassion and with wisdom, not enduring, gritting your teeth, waiting for things to move on, but just it's a compassionate endurance. It's not an endurance of will that just is waiting for things to be as it should be. Waiting for the right sensation and the right thought and the right feeling to move. And it is quite funny. I still remember once you start dismantling that sense of self, you note how disconnected these various parts are. One is a great bodhisattva, and the other one is a sort of greedy pig, and then you've got the lustful sort of, lustful obsessed, sort of the kind of that kind of entity, and then you got the helpful one, and then you got the whingy one, and then you've got the sort of poor me one, and then it's got a whole, it's not very intelligent in the way, in the kind of response scopes, but it's got a lot of, facets and faces, many different faces. So we get fooled, because one moment we want to help the whole world, and the next moment we want to eradicate our neighbor, And then one moment we want to fast for the next 3 weeks, and then the next moment you've got the third cake in your hand, and then you wonder why. What happened? Where is your sense of integrity? But that's just the many faces of self. So it is a jarring experience, isn't it? We really wonder who we are. What am I? When once on a retreat, winter retreat at Amaravati, having made a pact with one of the nuns that if I was going to sleep, she should pull my robe behind me, push me. So I was kind of nodding. And I was really, thought I was doing the right thing. And I was truthful, I thought I was really well-meaning, and so on. And then 3 weeks into the retreat, when everything had calmed down completely, my mind was really calm, 3 weeks into a deep meditation retreat and so on, winter time, everything is quiet, nice, lovely teaching was Ajahn Sundara, he's really inspired during those long retreats, and so on, And I was kind of quite near him, maybe about a couple of meters away from him. And suddenly my robe got pulled. And it's interesting, my reaction, I had an instant image, and the word across the image, kill. I'm not joking, it was extraordinary, and then you can't trust it, kill. And of course, that was the sort of immediate response, and then the rational came. Thank you, sister. I'm so glad you did it. Well, we did make a pact. We did made an agreement that was the case, that should be like that, should be like that. But then what was, you kill it. So you get into this kind of funny situation like that, which gives you an enormous amount of, a sense of humor in relation to yourself, because we do take ourselves awfully seriously, don't we? Very, very seriously. And if somebody says something nasty to you, it's quite natural you get hurt. But if it was an idiot who said something nasty to you, you would not mind, would you? So a simpleton, a kind of, Down syndrome little child, let's say, you bloody idiot. You would not mind. But imagine just now if somebody else said that to you, how would you feel? It's like the story of Ajahn Sundara, who to sort of describe the way we react to that sense of self, was telling the story of, the man, the two men. There's one man who goes to the office to work every day, and then on the other side of the pavement, across the road, there's another man who keeps insulting him every day. And he's really upset. He's insulted and he's really get upset. And so that goes on for quite a long time. And then one day, he tells this to a friend, and then the friend says, "Oh, that guy who was insulting is mad anyway." And of course, what happened is that the guy who was insulted, that's finished. It's the end of the story. Because the guy was mad, we don't mind. Play around in your mind. Be a bit creative with your mind and play around. If somebody said how stupid you are, and see whether you would mind. If somebody else said it, you might just be on the verge of a breakdown. That's how the self is really, is a big cheater. And if we have, if we put our confidence in that sense of self, if this is the only thing we can feel confident, then we are in great trouble, because it is so fleeting and so unreliable and such a cheater, a thief, liar, but it doesn't know anything else. So compassion is an absolute necessity. It doesn't know anything else. It's just automatic. It's automatic buttons. Notice in the morning, you might I remember Ajahn Sundara in the early years used to say to us, my first retreat with him before I was a nun, he said, when the bell rings, jump out of bed and jump out of bed. So I used to jump out of bed, I was still quite fit in those days, and I took it literally. I jumped out of bed and started exercising, doing my yoga, running, and all that sort of thing. And what happened in the morning? You wish you could jump out of bed, feel bright, sprightly, clear-minded, physically fit, no pain, nothing, and ready to sit. Now, how many times this has happened to you in the morning? Now, it should be like that, of course. We all agree, don't we? It should be like that. But is it? One morning you get up with a migraine. The next morning with a head, with confusion. The next morning you had a terrible nightmare during the night. You go through 5 hours of fear after that, wondering what happened. Just woke up for a nightmare maybe. And so it is totally an unreliable thing. And our practice is to be very, very patient, to see through, the whole story of me and mine, to actually see. And it's not that easy, because as long as we're strongly identified with it, then it will be also very painful. So as we practice mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of thought, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mental states and so on, we start getting bits of self. We can sorting out. We get bits of me. They're not sort of tangled up yet. They're not all jammed up together, to make a story. We just get a bit of a thought, and we look at it and say, kind of come and goes. If we hadn't been mindful, that thought would have been like streamed up with a whole range of other thoughts, and by the time within 15 minutes, we would have a whole scenario. But through mindfulness of thinking, the scenario is broken down. You can just see one thought and make nothing of it. Same thing with emotions. We get a glimpse at least of one little emotion rising in the heart is not devastating. If we hadn't seen that, it would have been volcanic perhaps. You would have been totally overwhelmed by the story of that emotion. So you kind of learn how to just nip things in their bud, when before they start, turning into a massive sankhara, construct, when you start building up things out of thin air. Like the guy, was kind of being insulted every day, and when suddenly he was kind of building all that thing, why does he do this? Why is he insulting me? And he shouldn't be. And anyway, I'm going to tell him off, and then he's mad. Oh, well, everything disappears. That's fine, no problem. He can insult me as long as he like. I don't mind. And in a way, we all want to come. Don't we all want to come to that point where really nothing will bother us? That's the fourth aspect, actually, of metta, which is upekkha. Is when you understand through wisdom, then, that there is no need to react with any anger or ill will or anything like that. There is no need to be harmful to anyone. Because you realize we're all in the same horrible mess, swimming in it happily, and we're all in the same reactive mode, and we're all in the same suffering. When I talk about mess, I really talk about the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. And we're all sharing this. I'm not the only one who suffers. Everybody else around me has the same amount of suffering. And so we begin to, just acknowledge, just as you sit on your cushion and observe your own suffering, there's the insight also that this suffering is universal. It's not just my suffering. It's everybody else experience that. So as you see this more clearly, then it's much easier to not believe in the mind when you are faced with situations which are, which have the potential to become so solid and real. And you remember when you get into a situation and suddenly you feel maybe filled up with tension or anxiety, and then you are with the body and you stay with the body and you breathe in and out, and then and the anxiety, if it hadn't been checked up, would have perhaps turned into a whole story and justification. I mean, this is a real difficult bit about the self, is that it will justify and make you believe that what you're feeling is worth feeling and worth hanging on to and worth clinging and worth believing and all that sort of thing. Right? This is the most vicious, quote-unquote, part of that little beast called me. It will totally make you believe that it's absolutely dead, unquestionably right. So when you feel like that, be careful. This is one of the symptoms, I know. When you suddenly feel, right, this is you're steeped into the potential of being immersed into the reality of me and mine. So, I leave you in these words.